Imagine one man who laughs at every single funeral in his village. Not a small smile, but real laughter that makes everyone angry. They called him a madman. They called him wicked. But this man, Adebayo, had a secret that would shock the entire village. By the end of this story, you will understand that sometimes the people we cry for don't deserve our tears at all. Stay with me because this African folktale will change how you see death forever. Hey, kindly support this channel by subscribing, liking our video, and hitting the bell icon. Let's go! In the village of Iluomo, Adebayo was the richest cloth merchant everyone knew. His compound was the biggest in the village, his wife was beautiful, and his children wore the finest clothes. But there was one thing that made everyone fear and hate Adebayo. The man could not attend any funeral without laughing. It didn't matter if a small child died or an old person. If it was an accident or sickness, Adebayo would stand at that burial ground and his shoulders would shake with laughter. The first time people saw him do this, they thought it was a mistake. Maybe the man was remembering something funny, or maybe he was just nervous. But as it continued to happen, funeral after funeral, year after year, the village people became very angry. "This one is a witch," some people whispered. "Maybe evil spirits have possessed him," others said. But because Adebayo had money and power, nobody could directly confront him. They just avoided him, hated him in their hearts, and prayed that one day the ancestors would punish him properly. Every market day, the women who sold tomatoes and peppers would lower their voices when Adebayo walked past. "That one laughed when my mother died," one woman would tell her friend, her face full of anger. "Ah, the same thing he did when my child died from fever," another would add, shaking her head with disgust. The men were no better. At the palm wine bar under the big tree, they talked about Adebayo like he was an abomination walking on two legs. But even with all this hatred, people still bought cloth from Adebayo. He had the finest materials that came from across the river, the best dyes, and the sharpest designs. So they would come, buy their cloth, collect their change, and leave quickly before they remembered that this was the same man who disrespected their dead relatives. Adebayo's wife, Folktale, suffered the most. Every day she grew thinner with shame. Other women would not greet her at the stream. Children threw stones at her own children and called them children of the laughing demon. She begged her husband every night to stop, but he would only touch her face gently and say, "I cannot help what I see." One dry season afternoon, 3 elderly men arrived at Adebayo's compound. These were not ordinary men. They were the keepers of tradition, the ones who spoke with the ancestors, the ones whose words could bless or curse. They sat under Adebayo's irako tree and refused the kola nuts he offered them. This was a bad sign. When an elder refuses your kola nut, it means they have come with serious trouble. Adebayo, the oldest one, spoke, his voice like thunder rumbling far away. "You have mocked death itself. At every funeral you laugh while others cry. You spit on our traditions. You insult the dead. The ancestors are watching you, and they are angry. If you continue this behavior, a terrible curse will fall on your household. Your children will know suffering. Your wife will know sorrow. And you will die a shameful death." The compound was silent. Even the chickens stopped their noise. But Adebayo only smiled and said, "Respected elders, I mean no disrespect, but I see what I see, and I cannot unsee it." The elders left his compound shaking their heads, knowing that trouble was coming. What the village didn't know was that Adebayo had not always been this way. There was a reason for his strange behavior, and it all started when he was just 8 years old. It happened during the festival of Un, the river goddess. All the children were playing by the riverside, splashing water and laughing, when young Adebayo slipped on a wet rock and fell deep into the river. He sank like a stone. The water filled his nose, his mouth, his lungs. He tried to scream, but only bubbles came out. Down, down, down he went, and just when he thought he would die, something strange happened. The world became very quiet, very peaceful, and in that space between life and death, young Adebayo saw things. He saw shadows, but not normal shadows. These shadows showed the truth of people's souls. When the fisherman finally pulled him out and pumped the water from his chest, Adebayo was alive, but he was no longer the same boy. From that day forward, he could see the real shadows that people cast, the shadows that revealed who they truly were behind their smiles and nice words. After the drowning, Adebayo's life changed completely. He would look at people and see two things: the person standing in front of him and the shadow of their true self beside them. It wasn't the regular shadow that follows us in sunlight. No, this was different. This shadow showed every good deed, every bad deed, every secret, every lie, every truth about who that person really was. When he looked at the kind neighbor who always smiled and greeted everyone, he saw a shadow covered in dark handprints of the children that man had touched inappropriately. When he looked at the woman who cried the loudest at church, he saw a shadow holding a knife because she had poisoned her co-wife's food. When he looked at the respected trader everyone called honest, he saw a shadow carrying bags of stolen money. At first, young Adebayo tried to tell people what he saw, but his mother beat him and called him a liar. His father said evil spirits had entered him. So Adebayo learned to keep quiet. He learned to watch. And he learned that almost everyone in the village was living a lie. The first funeral Adebayo attended after his drowning was for a man called Baba Benga. Everyone said Baba Benga was the most generous man in the village. They said he helped the poor, gave money to widows, and never turned anyone away from his door. The whole village came out to cry for him. Women rolled on the ground. Men fired guns in the air. The chief himself came to praise Baba Benga's goodness. But young Adebayo, standing at the back of the crowd, saw something different. He saw Baba Benga's shadow, and it was twisted and ugly. It was covered with the marks of the poor people he had cheated, the workers he had refused to pay, the apprentices he had beaten mercilessly. As everyone cried and praised this good man, something bubbled up in Adebayo's throat. Before he could stop himself, he giggled. Then he laughed. His mother slapped him hard across the face, but he couldn't stop, because he knew the truth. The man they were burying was not good at all, and yet everyone was crying for him like he was a saint. From that day, at every funeral, the same thing happened. Adebayo would see the truth, and the laughter would come. Year after year, Adebayo grew into a man carrying a terrible burden. He attended funeral after funeral, and at each one he saw the lies. He saw murderers mourned as peaceful people. He saw thieves celebrated as honest men. He saw adulterers praised as faithful spouses. He saw cruel people remembered as kind. The gap between what he saw and what people said became so wide that the laughter became his only relief. Sometimes he tried to control it. He would bite his tongue until it bled. He would dig his fingernails into his palms. He would think of sad things to stop the laughter. But it never worked, because the truth he saw was so loud, so clear, so undeniable that his body had to respond somehow. His wife Folktale would beg him with tears in her eyes to just pretend, to just cry like everyone else, to just fit in. But Adebayo couldn't. "How can I cry for a wolf?" he would ask her. "How can I mourn for someone who caused pain to so many?" Death doesn't change what a person was. It only reveals what we refused to see when they were alive. One night, after another terrible incident at a funeral, Folktale locked their bedroom door and stood in front of her husband with tears streaming down her face. "They are going to kill us, Adebayo," she cried. "Do you not see? The whole village hates us. Our children are suffering. Today, someone threw rotten eggs at our daughter. Yesterday, the blacksmith refused to fix our tools. They are planning something terrible. I can feel it. Please, I am begging you, tell me why. Why do you laugh at funerals?" Adebayo looked at his wife, this woman who had stood by him despite everything, and his heart broke. He pulled her close and said quietly, "My dear Folktale, I laugh because death is the only honest judge in this village. When someone dies, their shadow cannot lie anymore. I see who they really were, and most times the people we cry for were terrible when they were alive. But nobody wants to hear the truth. So I laugh, because if I don't laugh, I will go mad from seeing all these lies. Folktale held him tight and whispered, "Then let us run away from this village. Let us go somewhere where nobody knows us." But Adebayo shook his head. "We cannot run from truth, my wife. And soon, very soon, this village will have to face it." Chief Adela had ruled the village for 30 years. Everyone loved him. He settled disputes fairly. He protected the village from enemies. He made sure the farms were fertile and the markets were busy. When he suddenly collapsed during a council meeting and died 3 days later, the entire village went into deep mourning. It was as if the sun itself had fallen from the sky. The funeral preparations took 2 weeks. They slaughtered 10 cows, 50 goats, and countless chickens. Drummers came from 5 different villages. Dancers rehearsed special performances. The chief's family prepared the finest burial cloth money could buy. Everyone in the village was expected to attend and cry. Folktale begged Adebayo on her knees not to go. "Please, my husband, this one is different. This is the chief. If you laugh at his funeral, they will kill you. I know they will. Please, let us hide in the house until it is over." But Adebayo refused. He put on his best agbada and said, "I must go, because if I don't, people will think I am afraid. And I am not afraid of truth." The funeral was the biggest anyone had ever seen. Thousands of people gathered. The chief's body was dressed in royal cloth, surrounded by flowers, laid on a platform decorated with gold. Priestesses poured libations. Praise singers sang about his greatness. Drums thundered so loud the ground shook. Women wailed and rolled in the dust. Men fired guns into the air. Everyone was crying. Everyone was mourning. Everyone was praising Chief Adela as the greatest man who ever lived. Then, from the back of the crowd, came a sound that made everyone freeze. Laughter. Clear, unmistakable laughter. People turned their heads slowly, and there stood Adebayo, his whole body shaking with laughter he couldn't control, because what he saw made mockery of everything being said. The chief's shadow was one of the darkest he had ever seen. It showed a man who beat his wives in secret, who sold village secrets to enemies for money, who had arranged the deaths of people who questioned his authority. As the priestesses called the chief a man of peace, Adebayo laughed harder. As the praise singers called him a protector, Adebayo laughed louder. The whole ceremony stopped, and in that terrible silence, the new chief, Adelia's eldest son, stood up and pointed at Adebayo. "Seize him," he commanded. "Today, this man will answer for his sins." They dragged Adebayo to the village square with ropes tied around his hands. His wife and children were held back by strong men as they screamed and cried. The entire village gathered, and this time nobody was quiet. "Him," some shouted. "Bury him alive," others screamed. "He is a witch. He is evil. He must die." The new chief raised his hand for silence, and slowly, the crowd calmed down. "Adebayo," the chief said, his voice cold as night wind, "you have mocked the dead for many years. We tolerated it because of your wealth, because of your position. But today you have gone too far. You laughed at my father's funeral. My father, the greatest chief this village has ever known. You will now explain yourself, or you will face the judgment of the ancestors. We will bury you alive in the evil forest, where your body will never find rest and your spirit will wander forever." The crowd roared in approval. Adebayo looked around at all the angry faces, at his crying wife, at his terrified children, and he knew this was the moment. Either he told the truth now or he died with his secret. He took a deep breath and said, "I will tell you everything. But when I finish, you will wish you had never asked." Adebayo's voice was steady as he spoke. He told them about the drowning when he was 8 years old. He told them about the space between life and death. He told them about the gift, the curse, the ability to see people's true shadows. Since that day, he said, I have seen the truth about every person in this village. And at funerals I see the truth about the dead. I don't laugh at death. I laugh at your lies. I laugh because you cry for wolves and call them sheep. The crowd was silent now, listening. Some faces showed confusion, others showed anger, but everyone was listening. You want to know why I laughed at your chief's funeral? Adebayo continued, looking directly at the new chief. Because your father was not the man you thought he was. His shadow showed me everything. He beat your mothers in the night when nobody was watching. He sold village secrets to our enemies for bags of gold that he hid in the forest. He ordered the killing of the previous chief's son so he could take the throne. He was not a good man. He was a monster wearing a crown. The new chief's face went white. The crowd exploded with shouts of anger and disbelief. But Adebayo wasn't finished. He had held this truth for too long, and now it was pouring out like water from a broken pot. You don't believe me? Adebayo shouted over the noise. Then let me tell you things that only the dead could know. He turned to a woman in the crowd. Mama Tolu, you cried the loudest when your husband died last year. Everyone praised you as a loyal wife. But I saw the truth. Your husband's shadow showed me that you poisoned his food slowly over many months because he refused to let you marry your lover. The bottles are still buried behind your kitchen. The woman screamed and tried to run, but people grabbed her. Adebayo pointed at a respected elder. Baba Akin, when your brother died in that fire, you cried and said it was an accident. But I saw his shadow. You set that fire yourself to collect his land. The kerosene can is still in your barn, hidden under the corn. The elder collapsed, shaking. One by one, Adebayo revealed secrets about the dead. Things that only those people could have known. Things that were later confirmed by shocked family members who found the evidence he mentioned. The village square became a place of chaos. Some people were crying. Others were confessing. Some tried to run away. And slowly, terribly, the village began to realize that Adebayo might be telling the truth. For 3 days, the village of Iluomo was in complete confusion. Families were fighting as old secrets came to light. The graves of honored ancestors were being questioned. People were confessing to crimes everyone thought were accidents. The very foundation of their society was shaking. Some villagers wanted Adebayo killed immediately to stop the truth from spreading further. Others wanted to hear more, to know if their own buried loved ones deserved their grief. The new chief called an emergency council meeting. The elders argued day and night. He is destroying our peace, some shouted. But what if he speaks the truth? Others asked. Then our whole way of life is a lie, the first group responded. Meanwhile, Adebayo remained tied up in a hut, guarded by young warriors. Folktale was allowed to bring him food and water. What will happen to us? She whispered. Adebayo touched her hand through the ropes. The truth is happening to us, my wife. Finally, after all these years, the truth is happening. Outside the hut, the village continued to tear itself apart, one revelation at a time. On the 4th day, the new chief came to Adebayo's hut with a proposal. We have decided to test you, he said. In 2 days we will bury Baba Tund, the old farmer who died yesterday. Nobody knows much about him. He lived quietly, kept to himself, had no wealth, made no trouble. If your gift is real, you will tell us what you see at his funeral. If you speak truth, we will know. If you lie, we will bury you beside him. Adebayo agreed immediately. The next 2 days felt like 2 years. The whole village was talking about the test. Would Adebayo laugh at Baba Tunde's funeral? Would he cry? What secrets would he reveal about the quiet old farmer? Some people were betting with each other. Others were praying to the ancestors for guidance. Folktale couldn't eat or sleep. She knew that this funeral would determine whether her husband lived or died. On the morning of Baba Tunde's burial, the entire village gathered at the burial ground, even the sick and the elderly. This was not just a funeral anymore. This was a judgment, and everyone wanted to witness it. Baba Tunde's funeral was nothing like Chief Adelia's. There were no cows slaughtered, no fancy cloth, no drummers from other villages. Just a simple wooden box and a few elderly people who remembered him vaguely. He grew yams, someone said. Kept to himself, another added. Nobody could say much more about him. He had lived his whole life quietly, bothering nobody, and now he was being buried quietly too. They brought Adebayo forward, his hands still tied with rope. The new chief stood beside him, watching his face carefully. The whole village watched in complete silence. As the priestess began the burial prayers, everyone's eyes were on Adebayo, waiting for the laughter they had come to expect. But the laughter didn't come. Instead, something else happened. Tears began to roll down Adebayo's face. Slowly at first, then faster. Soon he was weeping openly, his whole body shaking with sobs. The village people looked at each other in confusion. This had never happened before. The man who laughed at funerals was crying. Something was very wrong or very right. Nobody knew which. "What do you see?" the new chief demanded, grabbing Adebayo's shoulder. "Tell us now. What do you see in Baba Tunde's shadow?" Adebayo could barely speak through his tears. When he finally found his voice, it was broken and full of pain. I see a shadow made of pure light. Every night of his life, he shared his small harvest with families who were hungrier than him. He found lost children in the forest and brought them home safely. When thieves stole from his farm, he forgave them and even left extra yams for them to take. The tears kept flowing as Adebayo continued. He prayed for his enemies. He never spoke evil of anyone. He helped rebuild houses after storms without asking for payment. He gave his last coins to a beggar and went hungry himself. He was good, truly completely good. And none of you knew. None of you honored him when he was alive. None of you visited him when he was sick. None of you knew his name until today. Adebayo looked around at the crowd, his eyes red from crying. I cry because we lost someone truly worthy, and this village was too blind to see it. You gave the biggest funeral to a wicked chief, but this man, this beautiful soul, you bury him like he is nothing. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound. Old women began to remember things, their voices shaking with realization. Yes, I remember now. Baba Tund brought firewood to my house when my husband was sick. I didn't even thank him properly. Another voice joined in. He helped me rebuild my fence after the big storm. I never paid him. I forgot about it. One by one, people started remembering small kindnesses, forgotten favors, quiet helps that Baba Tund had given without asking for anything in return. A young man stepped forward, tears in his eyes. When I was a small boy and got lost in the forest, this man found me and carried me home on his back. My father gave him 1 yam as thanks. Just 1 yam. And he smiled and said it was enough. The crowd was crying now, but not for Baba Tund alone. They were crying for themselves, for their blindness, for their foolishness. They had celebrated monsters and ignored a saint. They had given honor to the wicked and forgotten the righteous. The new chief fell to his knees beside the simple wooden coffin. "Forgive us, Baba Tund," he whispered. "Forgive us for not seeing you." And in that moment, the whole village understood that Adebayo had been right all along. For 7 days, the elders met in the sacred grove to discuss what should be done. They consulted the oracles. They poured libations to the ancestors. They argued and prayed and thought deeply about the path forward. Finally, on the 8th day, they called the village together and announced their decision. The oldest elder spoke, his voice carrying the weight of tradition and wisdom. "Adebayo has shown us a painful truth. We have been honoring the wrong people and forgetting the right ones. From this day forward, the elder continued, Adebayo will be known as Olumojuto, the guardian of truth for the dead. At every funeral, he will speak privately to the family and tell them what he sees in the shadow of the deceased. Not to shame them publicly, but so they can remember their dead honestly. The living must learn to do better than those who came before. We must learn to honor goodness while people are still alive to receive that honor. We must learn to see the truth before death reveals it. Adebayo's ropes were cut. His wife and children ran to embrace him. The village, humbled and changed, began the hard work of learning to see truth while people were still alive to benefit from it. Years passed, and Adebayo served his village faithfully as the guardian of truth. He never again had to laugh at funerals, because people began to live more honestly, knowing that death would reveal everything. When wicked people died, their families received the truth privately and learned from it. When good people died, the whole village celebrated them properly. Slowly, the village of Iluomo became known throughout the land as the place where people lived with integrity. When Adebayo finally died, old and respected, the entire village came to his funeral. Thousands of people cried genuine tears because he had changed their lives. They buried him in a place of honor beside Baba Tunde's grave. On his grave marker, they carved the proverb he had lived by, "Death does not lie. The ancestors judge not our tears, but our truths. Let us weep for the worthy and learn from the wicked, but never confuse the two." And from that day until this very day, the village of Iluomo teaches their children that how we are remembered matters less than how we truly lived. The man who laughed at funerals taught them the most important lesson of all. That truth, no matter how painful, is always better than beautiful lies. Hey, I'm curious. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. Also, what do you think about the story? He laughed at every funeral, until one day he cried, "Drop your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful African stories that will touch your heart."